Hello, everyone. On today's podcast episode, I'm gonna talk about these charities, these African charities that I keep seeing on YouTube and TikTok. Over the years, I've seen a lot of TikToks with where you see the kids, kids dancing for charity, or you see people, when you scroll through TikTok once in a while, you see people, you know feeding kids in Africa or wherever country they're at. And it's got me thinking. I've seen so many videos where the kids are being mistreated, subtly, you know, within the videos themselves. And, it's got me thinking, if these guys are treating these kids that badly in front of the camera, how badly, would they be treating them off the camera, you know, away from the camera? And that's something you just got to think about is if you keep donating to these charities, are you really donating to people that help kids, or are you donating to people that are that are using the kids to beg you for money? Because that's why you probably have to be careful who you donate to online. If you want to donate, probably just donate to some reputable charity online. Reputable charity online, or something that the government has checked and made sure is actually reputable. Otherwise, if you donate to these random like YouTubers or TikTokers or Instagrammers, who have children, who show you children in front of them, they're helping those kids. You really have to be careful whether you're actually donating to help the kids, or you just donating to a bunch of adults, just for them to have money to buy vehicles and weapons to use to kidnap kids in the future. I've seen many news articles, in all over TikToks, where these are people in Africa and in different countries, where the kids are being stolen, yeah, being kidnapped. And you have to be careful. Some of these people that you see online with helping kids, these kids may not be their own. These people may have stolen these children, or they may be using these children. Some of these people buy kids. In some places in Africa, you can actually buy children. You can buy children. So they buy kids, or they kidnap them, and then they post them online as if they're charities helping children, or they're orphanages helping children. When the truth is the opposite. These children are their slaves. They've trapped these children in. You know, they've trapped these children at their home, away from their real parents, and then they start. They're treating them badly behind the scenes. Yet in front of you, they have a camera in front of you, showing you how badly they look. How starving they are. And when the truth is, they're only starving because they were stolen from their parents. They aren't starving because the parents, died, or something happened to their parents and they ended up at an orphanage. It's the opposite. You have to really be careful, because there's some crime syndicates out there that actually do these things where, instead of helping children, they actually kidnap kids because they know there are people in different countries that'll give them money. They make their money by kidnapping kids and pretending these kids are at an orphanage. And every time you donate money to them, $1 here in the United States, it could be thousands of dollars in Africa. It's somewhere in Africa. So if you end up giving them money, you're not giving an orphanage money. You're giving a cartel, a crime syndicate money. You're giving them money because you see them, with children, and you think they're helping the children, not knowing that it's the opposite. These are the bosses. These are the criminal bosses that are controlling those children. They're putting the children in a sorry state in front of the camera to guilt trip you to give them money. And after you give the syndicates money, they take that money to buy drugs and do whatever they want to do with it. Sometimes they use it to fund their own wars. To arm themselves with weapons, and there's nothing you can do about it. That way they can start robbing and killing people. And there's not, behind the scenes, You don't know what's going on, but in front of you, all you see is, a bunch of starving children, and you think, these guys are the kind, helpful one. The people that you donate money to are the kind, helpful ones that are helping the children, not knowing you're donating to the problem itself. You're giving the people that are, enslaving these children money to further enslave the children. So you have to really be careful when you see these kids, online, and when you see them, on TikToks. You just have to know that not everybody on TikTok is a kind person. Not everyone that have kids on TikTok is a kind person. Some people, these are just their family members, right? The children are the family members. If you don't know how Africa works, is that children aren't really seen as they seem more like work tools. People have children to take care of themselves. They don't have children because they like children in and of itself. Children are seen as pets. They're seen as work tools. That you have children so that the children can take care of you. So if you give these families money to take care of their kids, and they don't treat the kids as if they're the family members. They treat them as like slave workers. They're not gonna be giving those children money. They're not gonna be using it to help the children. That's why if you notice these orphanages, right? Every year they make videos of children starving, and every year they get donations behind the scenes, but every year the children are still there starving. They're still showing you videos of the same children. Sometimes sometimes when the children get too old, they move them off camera and bring a bunch of new kids in. But don't you find it weird that every year the same orphanage from 2 years ago that you see, the same orphanage videos, the same starving children videos from 2 years ago, those very channels are still alive right now. After all the money they've been given, nothing has changed whatsoever in the improvement of the lives of the people. The children are still starving. 2 years ago, you saw the children starving to death, and many people give them money for that. Right? 2 years later, the children are still starving. So what did they do with that money? That's what you really have to be careful of. Giving people money online is that you don't really know who you're giving money to. You've been giving money to a crime syndicate, and you don't even know it. Especially when it comes to children. When it comes to children are so easily manipulated, man. You give them a couple, if you give the orphanage millions of dollars or hundreds of dollars, they will not spend a single dime on the children. They'll still feed the children the same old stuff they fed the children before. Because the problem is not money. The problem is who's controlling, who's managing these kids. If you can't find the right person to manage these kids, you're just wasting money. And the worst part of it is, since these people know they can make money from these kids, why would they want to take care of the kids? There's no overarching government that's watching over them. These people are just doing their own thing. If they know they can make money, by guilt tripping you to give them money, every time they throw a bad looking kid in front of you, a starving kid in front of you. If they know they can make millions of dollars or millions of Nigerian African dollars from these kids, don't you think they'll think this at the kids as a business strategy? Why should they make the kids look good? Because the moment these charities, these organizations make the kids, help the kids' lives, you will no longer donate money to them ever again. So there's there's a conflict of interest. If you give them money and they take care of the kids, you will no longer give them money because the kids will be healthy now. They will no longer look starving, and then you will give up giving them money. But if the kids always look starving, you will always be driven to give them money. So there's a conflict of interest. If they help the children, and with your money, you'll no longer give them money because now they've helped the children. At least you may still give them money, but other people will no longer give them money because they've used your money to help the children. Now other people are looking at those children and they see, healthy, well-fed children. Why would they give well-fed children money? They have their own kids, to give money. They have their own friends and family to give money. The other starving children in the world. You're not the only one that's starving, Since you're no longer starving, we'll give the money to someone else. So these charities also have to think about that fact that if they help the kids, what's in it for them? They get no benefits in helping these children. None whatsoever. And the worst part of it is the moment they help the children, you no longer give them money. So it just, it's like a conflict of interest. If they help the children, you no longer want to give them money. If they don't help the children, you give them money, but in the future you may get angry that they're no longer helping the children. But at that time, it may already be too, may have already been too late. They've already made so much money from you giving them money that even if you get angry, what are you gonna do? They're somewhere in Africa. You're gonna take your money back? It's a donation. You can't, if they use PayPal's friend, if you use PayPal's friend and family feature, you're not gonna get your money back. You can't really get donation money back. You're not supposed to, unless you have a way to unless you figure it out with your bank. But usually you can't take you can't refund donations. So this is what you have to really think about when it comes to kids seeing videos of kids in Africa. Some of these videos are doctored images, doctored videos, especially now that AI is prevalent. AI is so useful. You can use AI to create AI generated kids. You do it well, people will actually think they're actually real kids and start giving you money for it. So there's so many ways to scam people, man. And if you're someone who just likes donating to starving kids, it's best to donate to charities that you know about, reputable charities. If you donate to random TikTokers on TikTok, the random Instagrammers on Instagram, or YouTubers on YouTube, you may not be donating to the people you think you're donating to. You may just be giving an adult or a crime syndicate money. You give them money to buy guns. You give them money to buy weapons. You give them money to terrorize their community, and that's what you're doing. You give them money you're giving criminals money to be even more powerful than they already are. They're already causing enough trouble in their community. Now that you're giving them money, now they can buy more drugs. They can buy more weapons. They can terrorize the street even more. The government will have more problems trying to get rid of them. So this is what you really have to think about. This is what I've been thinking about for a while, because I grew up seeing these feed the children commercials. So it's hard not to feel bad for the kids when you see them, and that's what some of these people use against you. You feel bad when you see the kids starving, but you really have to be careful. Some of these children are being used, especially those dancing videos. You can tell some of these children could be slaves being forced constantly to create one dancing video after another for money. There's an adult hidden behind the scenes that's forcing these kids to constantly make dancing videos over and over and over and over and over again. The kids barely gets any benefits from it because they always dress the same. Poor, badly dressed, looking hungry, looking emaciated, and yet they're still here making the same dancing videos over and over and over again. You know how tiring it is to constantly be dancing all day and all night. There's so many people you'll see them on TikTok lives constantly dancing for money. You never do you ever think about the fact that there could be criminals hidden behind the scenes, violent lunatics hidden behind the scenes. They just treat them like slaves. That the kids you see in front of you aren't really kids being taken care of, but slaves constantly being told to do this, do that behind the scenes, because you don't really know what's really going on behind the scenes. And I've seen too many videos of people children getting kidnapped in these countries to not know that some of these children in these supposed orphanages aren't really children whose parents have been lost, but children who've been kidnapped. That way, these orphanages can these supposed African orphanages can make money by guilt tripping people in foreign countries to give them money. You have to really think about who you give money to, because you may not be giving money to a kind charity. You may not be giving money to a kind orphanage. You may be giving money to a drug king, a drug king, or a criminal, or a violent, abusive orphanage. You may even be giving it to an orphanage that doesn't care about the kids. You could still be giving it to an orphanage, but you may be giving it to an orphanage that doesn't care one bit about the kids. Because the moment they start caring about the kids, you'll stop giving them money. When you no longer provide them money, then how are they gonna make money to buy drugs or buy food for themselves? If you want them to take care of the kids and they take care of the kids, and the kids no longer look emaciated and worn out, you stop giving them money, and they don't want you to stop giving them money. They want you to continue giving them money. So you really have to be careful who who you're giving to money online. Give money to those who are reputable. Giving money to any random stranger online, may have the opposite effect. You may be harming the kids you're seeing on camera every single day. You may be the one, making their lives even more miserable. Because if these guys didn't have money, they could have, given those kids back to their parents, or done something else, just move the kids back, abandon the kids somewhere so that an orphanage can actually come and take care of them, But because you keep giving them money, they keep getting away with it. If they keep getting away with it, they'll keep kidnapping children, They'll keep using children, stealing children, buying children, just to continue this scam. Where they trick you into thinking these kids are, kids without family members, when the truth is these kids were bought and paid for using your money, bought and paid for like cattle. They buy these kids using your money like cattle, and then mistreat them badly behind the scenes. That way, when they put them in front of the camera, they look broken, and worn out. That way, you can give them more money. So this is something you have to really think about, because I've seen too many news articles. Even in the United States, there's so many bad charities out there. Even in the United States, the number of charities out there that have been, even the bigger charities out there, the large charities out there, the more reputable ones, when the government starts looking at their, financial reports and things like that, you start noticing that these guys don't give a crap about the people they're giving the money to. You're giving them money for. You're giving them money. You're giving these charities money. And the vast majority of them just waste the money for themselves. They don't care about the people. Only a small amount of the money, actually goes to the people themselves. It's like that, like the Somali daycare center thing, where you first think, from afar, you think these guys are the kindest people. They're helping children. But, when you start looking at deeply at how they run the organization, that's when you start realizing that these guys are just scammers. They don't care about anyone. And, if there's so many scamming on charities in the United States, where they're constantly monitored by the government, even while they know there's a government out there constantly trying to stop them from committing crimes, there's still so many charities that get away with stealing from people, stealing from their donators, stealing from the people they're supposed to be helping. There's so many bad charities out there that just, it's normal at this point in time that you don't want to expect. If you actually do your research, you realize that there's just too many charities. The vast majority of charities are just way too good at hiding the fact that they're using the money that you give them to help themselves than to help the people you give them money for. And they keep getting away with it because they hide behind the excuse of, hey, we still, although we're doing a charity, we still have to feed ourselves, we still have to help ourselves. And then, but that's strange, it's okay for you to help yourself, but as the charity managers, the people running the charity, it's okay for you to make an income. But why do you have to use 90% of the money that was given to you to, for yourself, the 90% of the income coming to you? Why are you keeping it for yourself? Only using 10% for the people that, when you're asking for donations, you didn't tell us that 90% of the money is gonna be, you're gonna keep it for yourselves. You told us, give us money so that we can help the children. But now in the process of helping children, you're taking half the money. You're taking more than half the money. In some charities, they take 100%. Yeah, I've seen videos, news articles of people complaining about, and these charities are still running to this day. People complaining that some of these charities in the United States I'm talking about, not charities in different countries, but these charities are taking 100% of the income, and they're making excuses why they should have 100% of the income, coming from the donations, without giving a single dime to the people or to the cause that the charities were created for. So if the United States already has so many corrupt charities, what do you think is happening, in places like Africa where there's no government monitoring them. There's no Overwatch watching them to make sure they're not corrupt. There's no punishment for them to steal from the children. There's no punishment for them to create a crime syndicate where all they do is just kidnap kids just to show them in front of you as, homeless, sad, So if the problem is already this bad in the United States with charities, how badly do you think it is in different countries where there's no overhead government watching over them? So that's something you really have to think about when you donate. You have to really care, think about, are you really helping the children with your money, or are you just giving another criminal money to treat the kids badly? It's one thing to give them money. It's another thing to actually give criminals money, because all they use it to do is drugs and treat the kids badly. They won't give it to the kids. They may buy better tools like whips to use to whip the kids. Before they use their hands, but now that you give them money, now they can upgrade to a good whip to flog the kids when no one's watching them. So this is what you have to think about: is who are you really giving the money to? Are they going to help the children? If you give them money today, watch what they do. Within a year, if you come back to them in a year and they're still doing the same videos, they're not helping the kids at all in any way, shape, or form. They're just using that money for themselves. You see? So, but that's it for this podcast episode. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks. Bye.